Hello and welcome to another Green Thumb program. My name is John Schaefer and I'm with the Harris County Public Library. We produce the Green Thumb Show in conjunction with the Harris County Masters Gardeners. But our show is available for everyone in the Southeast Texas region, especially places like Brazoria County, where I'd like to welcome the Brazoria County Public Library for making this program available to their patrons as well. Thank you. We are so glad to have you here. So we are here online the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. And today's topic is seasonal tree care, how to assess your trees after that winter storms and prune them before we get into that Texas heat. And before I introduce our presenter, a couple of things. One, we love questions. Please type them into the chat or Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching this. We have master gardeners monitoring the chat right now, so you will get an answer to your question, or at least they will definitely try to get you an answer to your question. And second, our next show will be on Tuesday, April 15th, and it's sustainable gardening. So you'll definitely want to mark your calendars for that. Now, I am very excited to introduce our presenter today, Stephanie Gray. She earned a bachelor's degree in environmental science at the State University of New York in Plattsburgh. She worked on an organic vegetable farm after that, and then she worked in a controlled environmental agriculture operation before beginning her career with AgriLife Extension as a master gardener volunteer coordinator, and we'll ask her about that. She now works as a county agent with the commercial green industry and joining AgriLife as a county extension agent, District 9, College Station. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephanie. How you doing, Stephanie?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks, John.
Let me get a little sip of my tea here real quick. All right, please. I just mentioned AgriLife, and it's in your, I can see it on your screen right there. For those of people who don't know, can you just tell us in a nutshell, what is AgriLife?
Definitely. So I work for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and I'm based out of the Harris County office. So AgriLife Extension Service has offices all across Texas in all counties, and we provide agricultural education to the public. So I work with youth through our 4-H and urban youth development program, doing career exploration and supporting in extracurricular activities and clubs. I'm a commercial horticulture agent. So my specialty is working with people in green industry and urban agriculture. So supporting producers, providing professional development programs. And really we just do partnerships with local organizations, educating the public, and working with professionals too. So follow up and check out our website after this talk and kind of get to know us more.
And is this right now with rodeo season and 4-H? Is this like the busy season for you guys?
Yes, it is. So we have Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Some youth are showing, animals that they've raised. We have a couple spring break camps going on with some different parks. Very busy. Yeah.
Cool, very cool. I had no idea, and I'm very impressed to know now. So, but let's get to it. I know you've got a lot to go over, and this is the perfect weather to start trimming your trees. I was outside last weekend and worked a little too hard and I'm a little sore, but that's all right. I'm gonna listen to you and make sure I worked effectively. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I'm going to present today on seasonal tree care. A little background on this presentation. So I developed it after Beryl last year. So we had a huge storm wreak havoc on our urban forest in Houston. So we're going to talk about how to prepare our landscapes for severe storms and weather, and then also just kind of general maintenance and how to come up with ways to expand our canopy in Houston. So I'm going to be using words like urban forest. So that just kind of has to do with private, homeowners, parks, all public spaces. Our tree canopy is think of it as like a unified urban forest. So there's pockets of Houston and Harris County where there's more trees, more shade trees. And then there's pockets where there aren't as many trees, and that will create higher surface temperatures. So we really want to start thinking about even, residential trees and tree care as part of this bigger urban forest making up our area. So we're going to jump right in. based on, our large storm last year, right? So this is an excerpt from Space City Weather. I'm going to read it out loud. So large chunks of the Houston metro area are experiencing sustained winds of 75 to 90 miles per hour during Hurricane Ike, which happened a few years before. That made landfall with 110 mile per hour winds. However, during Beryl, the maximum sustained winds that most communities experienced were only 45 to 70 miles per hour. So this author says, I really don't understand why a majority of the Houston region is without power this afternoon. Beryl was a serious windstorm, but it was not as serious as hurricanes and storms we've experienced in the past. So most trees can survive winds from hurricanes as strong as category 1, but we know based off of Beryl that Houston lost up to 50% of its urban tree canopy. So why were so many of these trees damaged? Well, it's been due to a lot of previous stressors. So the trees in our area have experienced drought, a couple freezes. So these all work kind of compound factors to weaken, the healthy levels of our trees. They're more susceptible to wind damage. So we know that our urbanized tree canopy has to be rebuilt after Hurricane Beryl damaged a lot of our trees. A lot of community trees were impacted, so a lot of residential, trees. There were a lot of small branch sheddings and major limb breakage, and then this causes down power lines and, kind of the recovery program that Houston had to go through after Beryl. So this is a kind of like a bird's eye view picture of an urban tree canopy map. So you can see here that the dark green and the lighter green areas signify where there's a lot of shade trees, where there is a robust and healthy urban tree canopy. And then the white areas in here are locations that don't have any tree canopy coverage. So this is from 2011, and then we're going to advance 10 years later. You can see how there's a lot more white areas on this map, which means that our urban tree canopy is decreasing. So I hope to not only, kind of educate you all on how to maintain your trees, make sure that you're planting the right tree, that you prepare your tree, that you take care of it well, so that it can be kind of a long-standing matrix in this urban tree canopy. So we're going to keep moving along here. So trees can be extremely damaging. That's kind of what I talked about with, the effects from Beryl, downing all of these limbs, causing property damage, causing power outages. But we also know that trees provide environmental benefits. So having a robust tree canopy will decrease surface temperatures, therefore creating, more of a healthy environment for us and our communities. So we need to balance, the fact that trees can be damaging with the fact that they provide a lot of necessary environmental services, and we need to come together to rebuild a healthy urban forest. We're going to keep on trucking along. Like John said, if you guys have questions, add them into the comments here, and we'll kind of go and pause and go over questions or cover it all in the end. So how do we establish this healthy urban forest that I keep talking about, right? Well, it has to do with you as a homeowner. If you have landscape trees on your property, making sure that they are pruned to enhance their structural, to make sure that they're structurally sound, and make sure that you're planting the right tree in the right place. So trees have lots of different species, and some of these species of trees are more well adapted for Houston. Making sure that we're planting high quality trees. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how to select a tree from a nursery or a garden supply store, and then how to prune that tree and prep the site to have a successful planting. A lot of the resources I'm going to talk about we'll send to you after the talk. We'll post it in the chat, links to different websites and resources. One I'm going to start talking about is Hurricanes in the Urban Forest, a paper from University of Florida Extension Service. And they have a really great article on the effects of kind of local trees, tree species, and how they interact with wind. So we're going to kind of move on to that right now. So the goals of our talk, the importance of tree selection, making sure that you guys know our best management practices for tree care and maintenance, how to assess damage of trees after a disaster, and then how to follow up with contacting a professional or a certified arborist. So tree selection, we're going to talk about wind and its relationship to trees, tree and site selection, and then planting and establishing trees. So I talked about how there are different tree species. Some of them are well adapted for our area. One thing to consider when selecting a tree species is how kind of resistant they are to damage caused by high winds. So right here you see a list of highest wind resistant. These are recommended trees to plant in our area because they're structurally sound, their root system is extensive, and they are not susceptible to large limb breakage. So an example of that is a dogwood tree. So dogwoods are great to plant in our area. So are bald cypress trees. Sugar maples are able to withstand high winds, and so are Japanese maples. I also have on here swamp chestnut, which is a good variety to plant in our area as well. And then moving to the next slide here, you can see our lowest wind resistance. So that are trees that are very susceptible to damage, to being damaged by high winds. So these include our pecan trees, Chinese tallow, some red cedars, and a lot of palms are susceptible to a lot of wind damage. So you can, again, reference this article when you're deciding what trees to plant. This is also important for, city officials and county precinct, parks and rec personnel who are deciding what trees to plant in our area to rebuild this urban canopy. So keeping in mind tree selection and its relationship to wind resistance. Okay, we're going to now jump to another source, native and adapted plants for Houston. So this is a kind of article going over the tree species that are recommended for Houston. This is kind of taking into consideration their resistance to wind, also how adapted the tree is to our climate, and it gives specific variety recommendations as well. So large trees, you're looking at bald cypress, we talked about being, resistant to high winds, oak trees, some red oaks and white oaks are usually recommended more so than like a river oak or something like that. And then you can also look at recommended varieties for small trees. So American hollies, black cherry, a lot of people are doing Mexican plums and native fruit trees as well. So those are all great considerations.
Hey, Stephanie, real quick, can you
Yeah.
tell us, what is there per tree? Is there like a amount of wind they suggest, or is there an actual mile per hour of wind that we know that most trees are some are going to have bumps and some are not, and obviously a tornado comes through at F5, there's nothing you can do. I mean, I'm sure
Right.
that, it's going to take everything with it, but is there any
Yeah.
research?
Yeah, well, so most trees can withstand winds up to up to 80 miles per hour, but it really is not a standard rule because it depends on how healthy that tree is. So as much as wind will damage certain species more than other species of trees, within the same species of trees, it really depends on the health of that tree. So what kind of soil is that tree sitting in? Is it a heavy clay? Is it really sandy, or is it a good kind of loamy soil? Have you fertilized that tree recently? Is it prolific in, expanding its canopy, putting out new buds every spring? Is it damaged by insects or diseases? So those are all kind of more so considerations to be at the front of the mind. If you have a healthy tree, they'll be able to withstand higher winds. Yeah. But according to that article, I mean, you're looking at some trees that can withstand winds as strong as a Category 1, right? Which is about in that 90 mile per hour mark. So
yeah, that's
yeah,
most houses can't stay that.
Yeah, totally.
Great, thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah, so this publication will be shared as a resource to you all. It's also on our website. Another resource that I want to share with you guys when considering tree selection and species selection is the Texas Tree Planting Guide, put together by Texas A&M Forest Service. So this website is awesome. Bookmark this, save it when you're trying to expand and build out your landscape. You can do the custom tree selector. So you go to this website, click on custom tree selector, and then it will have questions trying to get to kind of understand what kind of space you have and what conditions will kind of point you towards a certain species over the other. So right now, the biggest thing to consider when you're planning to choose a tree to plant in your yard is how much space do you have. So, when you buy a tree from a nursery, you get it installed, you plant it yourself. It's a small sapling, right? They usually kind of max out at the nurseries in like 15 or 20 gallon pots. So that tree is going to grow up, potentially, if it's a large tree, to be 40 foot tall or taller at maturity. So you need to understand the small species of trees, medium versus large. And we'll go and kind of show you a couple pictures down the line on the next slide here that sort of exhibit, where you need your small trees, your medium trees, and your tall trees. So you have to keep aware of the utility pruning zone. So you don't want to choose a large tree species to plant within the space of your power lines or electrical lines. This is really what we ran into during Beryl. So many downed limbs on top of power lines. And it's because people are planting, large oak trees right in that utility pruning zone, excuse me. So keep in mind that your small tree zones are going to be, within 20 feet of any power lines or utility zones or any like right of ways, right? So by any sidewalks or anything like that. And then your medium tree zone will be about 70 feet or 50 feet from any utility pruning zones and also from any house or permanent structures. So keep in mind that your medium-sized trees will reach a height of about 40 feet, and then sometimes some species are smaller than that. You also have your tall trees. These trees will be 40 plus feet high at maturity. So it's pretty important to make sure that you're not planting these baby trees in an area where they can't reach their full maturity. So you have to plan for at least 50 feet from any permanent structure for a tree that will be 40 plus feet or more high at its maturity level. So really you want to make sure that you have the right tree in the right place. And one of the most important aspects of that, one is correct species selection, and two is making sure that you're planning enough space for that tree when it reaches maturity. This will save you a lot of headaches. You won't have to prune them as much, and it could prevent damage as well. So we're going to talk about how to select your tree, right? So we talked about species selection. We talked about right tree, right place, making sure you have enough space for it. And now we're going to dive into how to actually select that tree at the nursery or supply store. So we have one healthy looking tree and then one tree that you want to avoid. You don't want to take home a tree that might introduce diseases that won't be successful. So while you're at the store, looking at trees to buy, examine the tree, the specific tree. So that means you want to find a tree that has a single trunk. We call this the dominant leader or dominant, branch stem. It's really just the trunk. So you can see this yellower tree, it kind of branches out into a Y shape. That's a multi-trunk or V-shaped tree. You really want to choose a tree that has a single trunk. Then you're looking at the trunk flare. So that's this sort of hourglass shape that sits right on the top of the soil. So you want a healthy curve in that trunk. You don't want any damages on the trunk. So examine it, make sure there's no dings or, no bark that's really peeling off in an excessive amount. Look for any bugs, look for any signs of diseases like yellowing leaves or, damage. And then you also want to flip that tree over to its side and look at the roots. So actually kind of shimmy the plant out of its pot and examine the roots. So a healthy root system would fill up the pot, but they're not circling. So what you want to avoid is root circling. Sometimes it's called girdling. So in this unhealthy tree that we're trying to avoid, if you took that tree out of its container, you'd see that its roots were kind of all balled up. That will prevent the roots from establishing properly into the ground when you do transplant it. So you want to make sure that you're looking for healthy roots that aren't all balled up. So planting and establishing trees is important. Yeah, John.
I recently planted a tree, and I did not go through this. I had not seen your presentation, and it did have girding. Is that what you said? Now I kind of tried
to girdle.
Broke some off. Is there if you happen to get one that is root bound,
Yep.
What is the best thing you can do?
So you can prune the roots of your tree. So there are certain roots, if they're wound up, you don't want to cut the tap root. So first I'd recommend looking at an AgriLife Extension publication that talks about root structure, because you'll keep that tap root. You don't want to prune that, but some of the smaller roots that are doing the circling, you can prune them. So cut them with shears and actually like remove them. And then you can kind of manipulate the root structure so that it has more of a fan shape that you want to see with the roots. So pull them out a little bit, make sure that you're not damaging too much of the roots. I would say don't prune more than 20% of them, but you can kind of, manipulate that root ball to sort of spread it out before you plant it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yep. So this is a great diagram about how to actually plant the tree, right? So you selected the perfect tree from the nursery, and now you're digging a hole that's about 3 times the diameter size of the root ball. So, you make sure that your hole is wide enough, and then it's as deep as the pot. So if your pot's, 2 feet deep, you're digging a hole that's 2 feet deep, and that's 3 times the width of that root ball or of that pot. So you're making sure that the kind of that root flare that we talked about is right at the surface. You don't want to bury your trunk too deep, and you don't want any roots sticking up from the ground. We recommend that you backfill the planting hole with the original soil. So you don't want your planting hole to be filled with only compost or only like a planting potting soil. You actually want it to be the same as the soil that surrounds the tree. This helps the roots to establish properly and grow so that there's not a barrier between the hole that you planted and the surrounding soil. These roots are going to spread out. They're going to establish outside of that planting hole very quickly, and that's what you want to see. So we also recommend creating a soil ring or mulch. So you see right here, there's no mulch actually touching the trunk of the tree. There's more like a moat of mulch that's about 3 to 4 inches thick surrounding the tree in what we call the drip line. So you can see where the branches start hanging over. Draw an imaginary line directly to the ground. That's where you're going to surround the tree with your mulch ring. Other important things to note are the watering schedule. So you want to water, we call it deeply and thoroughly. So that means that you're really filling up this hole with water. So a slow running hose, just kind of leave it on, have it soak that hole. So we call it a thorough deep watering. When you're establishing the tree, if there's not any rainfall, so you have to supplement it with irrigation, water that new tree once every 7 days with a thorough deep watering. You're probably letting the hose run for, a couple minutes, maybe even 5, 10, 20 minutes, depending on the size of your tree and what kind of soil you have. And you want to make sure that the water drains down deeper into the soil profile. So you're not flooding that tree, but you're just watering it deeply and thoroughly enough so that the water's percolating down into the soil profile. And we'll talk about watering schedules a couple more times. We're going to talk about preventative maintenance and pruning. So preventative maintenance follows this idea of a structural pruning plan. So every pruning cut that you make on your tree, you have to keep in mind the end goal of having a well-balanced canopy, of having, one single trunk, and then having, enough shade and everything to make sure that the tree is structurally sound. So I'll kind of talk right now about watering schedules, and then we'll flip back to pruning. So we talked about this already, like this is without rainfall. So if it's raining outside and, you're tracking the weather, then you don't need to supplement your tree with additional watering. You're only watering your tree if we haven't received rain in a certain amount of time. So when you're first planting the tree, it wants to be watered in at least once every 7 days for the first about month or 2 months before the tree is really established into its site. So if we're in a drought, if there hasn't been any rain, then you need to supplement by watering your tree once every 7 days. During winter months, so we're talking November to February, in the absence of any rain, your tree only needs to be, this is a mature tree. Now that your tree is established, the mature tree only needs to be watered once every 21 days during winter. So this is when your, nighttime temperatures are lower, we have daytime temperatures that aren't very high. The tree is most trees are experiencing dormancy, so they're not putting on any new growth. They're not using up too much energy. They really only need to be watered once every 3 weeks. We move into our shoulder season. So this is fall, spring. So October, March, and April. You should water that tree once every 2 weeks. So temperatures are starting to warm up a little bit. If we haven't received any rain in 2 weeks in summer and fall, you should supplement watering your tree. And again, these are thorough, deep waterings. Then in the summer, so in the absence of sufficient rainfall, which means it hasn't rained at all in 7 days and the soil's really dry, there's no soil moisture in the first like 6 or 8 inches of the soil profile, then you go ahead and slow soak that tree once every 7 days to supplement. This watering during drought recommendations can be found on the Texas Forest Service website, and we'll kind of send those links to everybody as well. Tree survival strategies during drought. So right now, a lot of Texas is experiencing extreme drought. About 5 or 10% of Harris County is under drought conditions, and those are projected to expand. So we're looking at a really dry spring, a really dry summer already. So oftentimes in Harris County, we're put on watering restrictions. So these are recommendations on how you can still support your trees even during drought. Let your lawn grow taller. It will reduce soil temperatures. So anything you can do to reduce soil temperatures, mulching, letting your lawn grow a little bit taller, composting are all great methods. Don't prune during a drought. Don't do any root disturbances. So don't dig a hole next to your tree or anything like that. Also avoid chemical fertilizers when trees aren't receiving water, natural rainfall. It can kind of burn up the tree, and trees really need water in order to synthesize those fertilizers. Reuse water, right? Reuse shower, bath water, cooking water, capture it. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Occasionally in Houston, we have these big rain events and floods. Is there anything, obviously, that, I mean, you can't protect a tree if it's flooded, but is there anything we should know about, like, if a tree sits, if the ground's underwater for a few days and, really, I mean, it gets one of those massive soakings, does it just soak it up and deal with it, or is it?
Saturated soils can cause tree falls, right? So sometimes, like during Beryl, if y'all remember, there were a couple of trees, at least in my neighborhood, where the whole tree looked like it just popped out of the ground, right, and it still had its root ball, kind of connected to it. That's due to saturated soils. Especially in areas with heavy clay soils, that water can't percolate down further into the soil profile. So they're just sitting in like a little pond, basically. There's nothing you can really do to prevent that other than, ahead of time, making sure that the area has good drainage. So whether you have to set up some sort of underground drainage, system for your yard, or you're planting, kind of uphill to make sure that the trees aren't aren't being planted in like a low-lying area. Those are all preventative things. And again, just trying to encourage a healthy tree with a robust root system. That'll kind of help.
If the trees have been trimmed as they go, they're not going to be atop everything.
Yep. Exactly. Okay, so this is just kind of showing you guys how necessary a tree canopy is, a healthy, robust tree canopy. So we're taking a step back real quick here, right? So tree growth is affected by higher temperatures. So when we have really high temperatures, trees will go through extended growing seasons. So they'll kind of like, marathons, they're like, okay, we have higher temperatures, we're growing. They're not entering their dormancy period that a lot of our larger trees need. So this causes the tree to mature quicker and age quicker. So our trees are actually reaching maturity much quicker than they should be, which weakens them, which means that they're not having as sturdy of a dominant trunk. They're more susceptible to diseases and pests. This will result in increased tree death, right? So a lot of times when a natural disaster like Beryl comes, it'll wipe out a ton of trees that were planted at around the same time because they were just, aging quicker and not living to their full lifespan potential. So this means that we have to come back in and replace trees. We have to care for the new plantings. And then, we're losing our urban forestry canopy. We don't have as much shade, and this will increase surface temperatures, right? Which will then kind of create this loop of trees kind of going through extended growth seasons because it's hotter, and then we have lack of shade, and it just kind of feeds back into itself. So taking this moment again to pause and make sure that everybody is supporting tree planting efforts in Houston, and that if you are maintaining trees in your own property, that you're doing it well. We're going to jump now to another important maintenance aspect, which is identifying tree diseases. So I want to recommend everybody bookmark the Plant Disease Handbook that was created by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. It's all online. And if you click through the specific tree species, it'll go through signs and symptoms of certain diseases. These can be bacterial infections, fungal infections, mechanical damage that is manifested in some sort of disease with your tree. A lot of these diseases are opportunistic. So I keep kind of saying, make sure that your tree is healthy. So preventative maintenance is the best kind of way to solve any plant diseases. If your tree's healthy, if it has a robust canopy, it's undergoing photosynthesis, it doesn't have any root disturbances, it's watered properly, it's not sitting in water, then you'll have a healthy tree and it'll be able to fend for itself and kind of fight off a lot of these diseases. But sometimes, our trees do show symptoms of diseases, in which case I would recommend submitting a sample of the tree to our plant disease and diagnostic laboratory. So oak wilt is a huge issue in our area. A lot of our oak trees are experiencing oak wilt, and this can be diagnosed through our plant disease and diagnostic laboratory. And then they would also give you recommendations on how to remediate a lot of these diseases, or how to move forward. So that's another great resource for you guys as well. Right here, we're looking at the pruning schedule. So this is a great resource. I'll share this with you all too. It's from an extension publication called Pruning with a Purpose. So it's really important to prune young trees based, again, on how you want them to look when they're mature. So it really is a lot easier to prune trees when they're younger, to make sure that they're structural when they reach maturity. And we'll kind of talk about proper pruning cuts here in a little bit. But this is when to prune. So most trees want to be pruned in the late winter. So a lot of our trees go dormant during the winter. Ashes, elms, maples, oaks, pecans, pistache, sycamore trees. A lot of our evergreens and broadleaf trees. So these are your hollies, your myrtles, your yupons, your boxwoods, all your laurels. These trees we recommend that you prune these trees in late winter. So that's January or February. Your broadleaf and your evergreen trees, you can prune at any point. But the shade trees, you want to prune them when they're dormant. So trees enter dormancy during the cold winter months. This is perfect for you to prune them because they're not using their energy to put out new growth. They're not producing buds or seeds. They're not producing new shoots. They're really in this dormant period. So when you prune the tree is able to put its excess energy towards healing up that wound. So trees will heal themselves as long as the pruning cut is smooth, and we'll go over proper pruning techniques in a slide here, but prune them during dormancy. The exception to this rule is if you have a spring flowering tree. So your winter or spring flowering trees are like your dogwoods, some magnolias, redbuds, and the mountain laurel. These trees will produce flowers in the spring. So you don't want to cut them during the late winter, because this is actually going to be the new growth will be what's producing the flowers and producing the buds. So you want to go in the back end after June and cut and prune your spring flowering trees at that point.
Stephanie, we had a question, and I have a few questions coming in. One, and this might be along the prune, when to prune, although I'm not sure. Someone's asked, what about crepe murder?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, crepe myrtles, you got to just treat them like you do all other flowering trees. Follow the proper pruning techniques. You want to establish a couple co-dominant trunks, but go in and you never want to remove more than 25% of the tree canopy. So that's what we see when we call it crepe myrtle, which is just crepe murder, which is when some people will come in and just top the trees, and then it looks really bad. There's knuckling that forms at those junctures. You won't get any blooms because you've just cut off all of the new growth. So you really only want to ever remove no more than 25% of a tree's canopy. So there's crepe myrtles out there that are gorgeous, that are well pruned. They have multiple co-dominant trunks, very flowery. Follow those, right? If you see a picture of a good crepe myrtle, you can see then how your pruning cuts can shape it towards that example. So you just want to make sure that you're following proper pruning techniques, no matter what kind of tree it is. Mm-hmm.
I think we need to send some of those pictures to some certain power companies, utility companies that might.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have more questions too, but I'm going to hold off on the end because I think we're on a roll here. So let's keep
Okay.
We'll talk back in, jump back in.
Perfect. All right. So we're talking now. So now we're shifting from when to prune to how to prune. So I keep using this word structural pruning. So you want to make sure that your tree has a good structure so that it can withstand, damaging winds, so that it can be healthy. It can have enough foliage to produce, nutrients for itself and undergo photosynthesis. So what does structural pruning look like? Well, in most large shade trees, you're developing a dominant leader or a trunk. So you have one dominant leader that's kind of the main structure of your tree. And then you want to identify where the lowest branches are going to be, and that's going to make up your permanent canopy. So once you identify what height you want your permanent canopy to be, you would remove all of the branches coming off below that. You want to prevent branches below the permanent canopy from getting too large. So we'll talk about how to prune suckers that come up. You want to keep all branches less than 1/2 of the trunk diameter. So you're establishing this dominant leader, your trunk. It will continue to widen out and grow when it gets mature. All branches should not reach the same diameter as that trunk. They should be at least half as wide, essentially. You want to space out the main branches along one dominant trunk. So this is keeping your canopy balanced. So if you're training one branch to come off on this side, you want to make sure you're training another branch to come off on the other side at more or less the same height so that you have a balanced canopy and your trunk isn't, kind of weighing or swaying one side that's more heavy than the other. You want to suppress growth on branches with included bark. So I have a picture of included bark in a couple slides here, but that's when bark starts kind of growing over itself and overlapping. That decreases the structural integrity of the tree. So you want to prune those branches out. Issues that I see a lot in shade trees are co-dominant stems, included bark, an unbalanced canopy, overlifting, which just means that your branch is too wide, or large lower limbs. So this is my favorite diagram to kind of teach people about pruning large shade trees. So this is from the University of Florida extension, publication, and we can share that resource with you guys at the end. But this is a diagram of a mature tree. So you can see right here at basically number 1, that's the dominant structure. That's the trunk. So your primary branch. You can see number 1 at the kind of on the bottom right-hand side here, your primary branches, that's going to define your permanent canopy. So the bottom of your permanent canopy. So you'll never let any branches grow under this first primary branch, except for these little suckers. So a lot of trees will produce suckers or shoots. You want to keep these suckers on the tree until they reach 1 inch in diameter. When the suckers get wide enough that they're 1 inch in diameter, then you're going to go ahead and cut them off. Okay, so right here at number 1, we have our primary branches. You can see the trunk. You can see up top, kind of 3/4 of the way above that tree, there's a branch right there. So you have another primary branch that's going to help to make up your canopy. Then your primary branches, number one, kind of get more narrow, right? So you're decreasing the diameter when you go into your secondary branches. You want to keep your secondary branches. You don't want to prune them because they are integral to the structure of your tree. This is making up your canopy. And then you get even more narrow branches. So you branch out again from a V and you're at your tertiary branches. You could cut some of these tertiary branches, some of these level 3s, but we don't recommend them. Really, the branches that you're going to want to prune are the kind of 4th and 5th level of the branch. So you've decreased in your diameter kind of 4 times and 5th time. So these are smaller branches. You can prune these regularly following the pruning schedule. Right here, there's some water sprouts that are coming up. You can remove those when they get 1 inch in diameter, similar to your suckers. Right here, there's a codominant stem that's kind of shown at the top there. You want to avoid that codominant stem. So you're going to choose one of these to keep, and you're going to prune the other one to make sure that your shade tree has structural integrity. Okay, we're going to keep moving, but we can kind of revisit this diagram later on if you guys have more questions. But really just maintain that you're only pruning kind of those 4th and 5th level of branches, and you're making sure that the tree has a dominant trunk and dominant stems. You can see right up here, included bark. This is a diagram picture of included bark. You can see how the branch is kind of growing over itself. That will not be structurally sound, so you probably want to prune that limb off. Ideally, you would do that before the branch gets too big. Okay, so preventative maintenance, we're still talking about pruning. So you want to prune the tree at planting. So younger trees can heal much faster than mature trees. And small cuts that you would make on a younger tree, the tree would be able to heal up quicker than if you have to go back in, 5 years down the line and use a saw or a chainsaw to cut a large limb. The tree will have a more difficult time healing from larger cuts. So you want to prune at planting, keeping in mind that scaffolding and that structural pruning diagram. And then you can prune again after the 2nd year that the tree has been established. After the tree is 2 years old, then you're going to prune the tree, a large shade tree, about every 3 years. So for the first 5 years, you never want to remove more than 20% of the tree. So you're really not taking off large swaths of the tree canopy. You're only pruning less than 20% of the tree. Then as the tree gets mature, a mature tree is over 5 years old, you're not removing more than 25% of the live foliage at one time. So that means that you have to maintain the tree's canopy and only remove about 25% of those branches at a time. And then you can go back in and prune the tree every 3 years. So we're going to kind of shift gears again here. We talked about preventative maintenance. We talked about structural pruning. I'll go back here real quick and highlight the proper pruning cut before we move on. So it's really important to properly cut your tree at the collar of it. So right here, there's this red solid line that says no. That red solid line is drawn over what we call the collar of the tree. So you want to do your cut above the collar of the tree. So this dotted line is where you want to cut the tree. The branch and the trunk meet at sort of this U shape. You want to cut the branch not flush against the trunk, but up a little bit and follow kind of the curvature of that branch. That's where you'll make your proper pruning cut. So make sure, and then the tree is able to heal itself right kind of above that collar. That's where a lot of that's where the tree is naturally inclined to heal itself. So that's where you should make the cut. Yeah. We do a 3-cut method. So for a large branch, your first cut will be just about halfway into the branch on the underside. Your second cut will be removing the whole branch from the top side coming down, so cutting off that whole branch. And then your third cut will come in right above that collar, and it'll be your smoothing or your perfecting cut. You want to make sure that all of the pruning cuts are smooth, that they're flat. That will help the tree heal itself. Okay, assessing damage. So we just talked about the proper pruning cut. You're going to want to go back in after your tree has shedded large limbs or if there's limb breakage and make a smooth cut up behind that damage. So on this diagram, you see these yellow dash marks. So the tree branches broke off. You need to then go back in behind the breakage and do a clean, smooth pruning cut. That will again help the tree to heal itself. So if your tree's been damaged, you want to first remove dead and cracked branches and broken limbs. Then you're making a smooth pruning cut behind those broken branches. At this time, you don't want to remove large portions of the canopy. Keep as much as the canopy as you can. You can reshape the tree. You can kind of fix an unbalanced canopy down the line after your tree has healed from the initial damage. All right, restoring trees is possible, especially if there's minimal damage. If only one or two main limbs on a mature tree are damaged, the tree can recover. You want to make sure you go and prune those damaged limbs and wait to see if the tree recovers. We'll jump to this next slide here. I have some images of when a tree can and cannot recover. So this bottom right here, tree looks like it just shed some small branches. The tree on my left-hand side where there's multiple codominant stems and one major limb, that tree might recover. You'd have to go back in and clean it up, but that looks like a major limb to me, so I'm not sure if it will recover. And then the tree on my right-hand side, it looks like that dominant stem just snapped right off. It is very unlikely that this tree will recover because it probably lost a lot of its canopy. Same over here, right? We have a major breakage in that left-hand picture. That tree looks like it just kind of split right down the middle. There's no way that tree will recover. The central picture here, it looks like it just had one major limb breakage. If you go back in, smooth up that cut with a proper pruning cut, that tree will likely recover. And then this one in the top right-hand side, I put this one in as a little trick, sort of, because it looks like where that tree might be able to recover, but it's posing a threat to the structure. So you want to remove that tree. So restoration is possible for deciduous trees. You experienced a damaging effect. You went back in, you removed all the broken limbs, you went in and did a smooth pruning cut behind the damage, and then you're going to wait. Wait to so long as your tree is not posing like a danger, it's not about to fall on any structures. Wait until the spring to determine if the tree is going to recover. If the tree does not sprout any new growth or buds by the spring following the damaging event, it will not recover. That tree just needs to be removed. With pine trees, if there are no new needles or the needles are all brown, the pine tree will not recover. With a palm tree, after 6 months, if it produces new growth, then you're good. That tree's recovered. If it's over 6 months and that tree hasn't set out any new growth, then it's probably damaged and dead. So we talked about this a little bit, right? So you see on this top picture there, it looks like the limb just broke off. This person's coming back in. They're doing a smooth pruning cut. And then, the following spring, that tree's going to put off new growth. So you want to remove some of the new sprouts. You're going to identify a new leader that you'll keep. And then you'll do your restoration pruning, which is reducing some of the other shoots, keeping this new leader, and eventually it'll look like this bottom live picture there where the new sprout has actually grown and matured and is becoming part of that branch. So that's how you sort of follow the restoration pruning schedule. All right, we're jumping in. So contacting a professional. A lot of tree works for our mature trees need to be done by a professional tree rigger or someone with the equipment to cut major limbs. The best resource for finding an arborist is the Texas Forest Service search site. So My Land Management Connector, you can click on find, you can put in your address, your area, and it'll match you with some certified arborists around Houston. Another resource I want to connect you guys with is a project I'm working on as part of a large grant-funded project with the Houston Area Research Center, a lot of Precinct 4, Harris County Flood Control, some student workers, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. So check out the For Us Trees project website. They're working hard to identify hotspots in Houston and make up priority plantings. So right now, according to their website, it looks like they've, they're trying to remove hazard trees. They're cultivating the workforce with this student internship program, and they're trying to equitably grow the urban tree canopy around Houston. So check out that resource to kind of get connected into the state of Houston's urban forests. Reporting damage, if you're a professional or a nursery grower, there's other ways to report damage, but use the individual state of Texas assessment tool. This helps the state request federal funds that can help restore damage caused by major windstorms and hurricanes and other natural disasters. So keep this in mind. We usually post it on the Harris County website. This is where you'll report the damage. There's also resources in here for disaster recovery. Some of these are out of date, but if you are a commercial grower, there's a lot of USDA assistance programs following disasters, and we'll post those on our website. That kind of concludes my really quick overview of tree care. We have some plant sales coming up. I'll put in a plug here. Our next one, I believe, is April 12th at Genoa Friendship Gardens. We'll also be at the Berry Center. Sci-Fair Home and Outdoor Living Show. They have a plant sale we'll be at. This is a list of resources. A lot of these we can share in the chat, in the comments. They all can be found on our website as well. And as always, you're encouraged to submit a question to our Ask a Master Gardener online submission form. So if you have a specific question, you can include pictures, and our certified Master Gardener volunteers will come in and answer those for you. There we go.
I've actually sent it. I've asked questions for, and they get back to you with more information than the World Wide Web could provide. So
yes,
it was very concise and very informative. So.
Mm-hmm. It's a great resource. And again, I mentioned a lot of publications. There's also a really great manual presented from the Forest Service. It's called Tree. You can't see it because I'm all blurry. But it's a tree owner's manual. It's a little booklet that shows a lot of the same kind of pruning techniques. It goes over tools. I think it's only like $10 or $15 sold by the Forest Service. So if you're a property owner and you have a lot of trees, or you're looking to plant new trees, I would recommend getting the Tree Owner's Manual, and you can get it at treeownersmanual.info. I'll put that in the chat too.
It is one of those things if you are lucky enough to be, moving into a new house or have some property that you're acquiring. I mean, the decisions you make at the very beginning could have substantial effect on how long, for the life of, the rest of your life, and certainly the rest of the life of the property and the plants. So it's worth taking a little time to think, do we want to plant this tree there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's something that can, be a real member of your family almost, right? It takes careful planning, but once you get that tree established, it'll grow and it'll be part of your home life for years. So it's really important to make sure that you know how to care for them, for sure.
It is like a member of the family. We lost the house I grew up in. We lost a pine tree, big, and I mean a massive one. And it's just the backyard's never the same. So
yeah.
Sure. We had a lot of questions come in, so I want to get to some of these real quick. One, can you talk about mulching? You talked a little bit about mulching, but could you elaborate on the term volcano mulching? And
sure.
I love the term, but I don't think it's a good thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, no. So what I talked about in this diagram right here, you don't need any mulch up against the trunk of the tree. There's no need for that. It'll actually be kind of a habit for bugs and pests, and it could compound fungal diseases for your tree. So nothing needs to be piled up on the trunk of the tree. It doesn't make any sense. The purpose of the mulch is to increase soil moisture and decrease surface temperatures. So the roots of your tree are expanding outside of that drip line. So the root system underground is what needs access to water. So you're mulching around the tree in that drip line in order to maintain soil moisture and decrease surface temperatures. So if you think about it more as in you're mulching almost like the roots, not so much like the trunk of the tree. The trunk of the tree doesn't need any mulch. It's really the roots that need access to water and nutrients that mulch will give them. So you're creating a ring of mulch around the tree, in line with that drip line, as a rule of thumb, maybe like 2 or 3 feet from the trunk.
Okay, that was my next.
Yeah, depending on the maturity of the tree, right? So like if you have just a baby tree, then this moat will be closer to the trunk because the trunk's not very big, but still, not up touching the tree. And then as that tree matures, you're going to mulch it again, once or twice a year. And you can kind of grow that circle to be wider and wider as the tree just gets wider. Yeah.
Well, very good idea to have an appropriate sized donut of mulch around the tree.
Yes. Yep. And I mean, the depth of the mulch is, all of this stuff is sort of just recommendations, right? So every tree's different, every site's different. We recommend like 3 to 4 inches of mulch, but I think that with like the volcano mulch, to be honest with you, a lot of like public lands personnel will pile up mulch on a tree because they know that these trees are not going to be watered. It doesn't do them any good though. More mulch isn't going to increase the soil water moisture level. It's really just as long as you have 3 or 4 inches, that's going to help.
Got it.
Yeah.
By the way, you mentioned the tree owner's manual. I just want to let everybody know that is in the chat right there. So if you're watching this at a later date after if you're not watching this live, you can just check the chat and you can find those links there. Other question. If you could talk a little more about invasive trees, I guess, look, it's hard to badmouth any tree, but I mean, if you had to say maybe if there's 3, maybe not this tree, maybe another tree in this area, what would you
I mean, you don't want any Chinese tallow, no Chinese tallow tree. I actually think there's restrictions on nurseries selling Chinese tallow in our area. So that's just a straight up invasive tree. It outcompetes a lot of our Yupons and our native fruit trees. So avoid that. I mean, otherwise it depends on the size of the tree. There's not really any, I guess I will say that a lot of, forestry experts are saying don't plant any palms. Palms really aren't doing well here. They're so susceptible to the freeze, and they're susceptible to wind breakage. I would avoid all palms, and no Chinese tallow. Apart from that, I mean, take a look at the Native and Adapted Plants for Houston guide. A lot of these are you can kind of sprinkle in some native fruit trees like Mexican plum, persimmons, and then, look at the large trees. A lot of these are what I would recommend.
Now, I know this is technically a grass, but bamboo can get the size of the tree. It can be very, very invasive.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Got it. And you mentioned some citrus trees earlier, I think. If you could talk about citrus and graft lines post freeze was one of our questions.
Yeah, that's a little bit. So you're kind of looking at, I would refer you to our Aggie Horticulture website. So there's a lot of great resources, and I'll link this right now. Fruit trees really want to be kind of pruned in a specific way to encourage fruit production. So we didn't cover that in the talk. It's kind of outside the scope of this landscape tree maintenance talk. But I am going to drop this link to Aggie Horticulture in the chat here. Check that out. There's specific guides for citrus trees, site selection, varieties, how to choose a citrus rootstock, how to graft it, how to plant it, fertilizing, making sure that you're pruning the tree specifically for encouraging fruit production. So go ahead and look at that. I think you'll have a lot of your questions answered just by checking out that publication.
And of course, it is a great time to plant a tree right now. And we mentioned the plant sale. If you don't mind jumping.
Yeah, I'll jump to that one. Yep.
I put a link in the comments section for the Genoa Friendship Garden, which is just an amazing resource, and very lucky if you live in this area, even maybe, outside of Harris County or Brazoria County, or, in some of the neighboring counties, worth the trip in, and can get some help there. So, man, I can't tell you how much I enjoy this and how much I learned. This is, I feel like I need to, I won't admit the mistakes I made in the past.
Learn just next time. Yeah, you're good.
As you were going through, I was like, hey, yeah, I did that one. No, I did that one too. So lesson learned. I can only going forward. I can make some better choices
Yes,
on that.
exactly.
There's one other link I want to hear about the agriculture. Yes, here we go. There you go. I see the link you put in there. Let me make sure I get this in here.
And I mean, I also think, John, that there's probably a Green Thumb talk on fruit trees too at some point. So folks could always, look up that archive on the YouTube channel too.
Absolutely. And of course, always go to the Harris County Master Gardeners website. There's you can ask them questions. You can also find out the website itself is a wealth of information. You can sign up and get that your great little publication that you make. Stephanie, thank you so much. I hope we get to see you again sometime soon. This was amazing. I want to remind everybody that we do have another show coming up next month. This again will be on April 15th, and that's sustainable gardening. So hard to believe that your gardening could be sustainable in this weather, but it can apparently, and you can learn all about that next month. So, Stephanie, thank you very much for your time, and want to say thank you to everybody for watching, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.